History shows that the most dangerous moments rarely feel dangerous. They feel reassuring, calm, logical, even optimistic. The phase that precedes structural failure is almost always marked by confidence, not fear. This is not a flaw of intelligence. It is a feature of human perception. Across centuries, societies have repeatedly believed that the present moment represents a break from historical limitation. New tools, new institutions, new rules are assumed to have resolved old vulnerabilities. Each era finds its own language for this belief, but the structure remains unchanged. This time is different, is not arrogance. It is normalization. As systems mature, stability becomes familiar. Familiarity breeds trust. Trust gradually transforms into assumption. Once assumption sets in, risk no longer feels like risk. It feels theoretical, abstract, someone else's problem. History shows that confidence does not rise randomly. It rises after systems have absorbed risk for a long time without visible consequence. When fragility is delayed, it is reinterpreted as resilience. When stress is deferred, it is mistaken for strength. This creates a psychological inversion. Warning signs are not denied outright. They are reframed. Leverage becomes efficiency. Concentration becomes optimization. Dependency becomes integration. Each rebranding reduces discomfort and reinforces belief in continuity. The system appears strongest precisely when it is least adaptable. At this stage, consensus begins to form. Not political consensus, but cognitive consensus. Disagreement narrows. Alternative interpretations are dismissed as outdated or alarmist. Complexity is simplified into narratives that support stability. History shows that this moment is critical. When confidence becomes widespread, it suppresses curiosity. When explanations converge, questions disappear. And when questions disappear, preparation stops. This is not because actors are irrational, it is because incentives reward conformity. In stable systems, deviation carries more immediate cost than alignment. Risk management becomes reputational rather than structural. This pattern has appeared before. Empires expanded trade networks until reliance replaced resilience. Financial systems layered abstraction upon abstraction until fragility became invisible. Monetary regimes extended credibility until credibility itself became the asset being consumed. In each case, stability was real, but temporary. It masked accumulating constraint. One of the most counterintuitive lessons of history is that stability often signals fragility, not because stability is bad, but because prolonged stability encourages specialization, leverage, and dependency. These improve performance under normal conditions, while reducing flexibility under stress. Systems optimize for efficiency sacrifice redundancy. Redundancy is expensive, it looks wasteful, until it becomes essential. The psychological phase that precedes structural weakness is not panic, it is confidence reinforced by repetition. Each year without disruption strengthens belief that disruption is unlikely. Each successful extension of the system validates its assumptions. History shows that this is when change begins, not visibly, but structurally. Quietly, constraints tighten, margins narrow, optionality declines. Adjustments are made not to expand possibility, but to preserve function. These adjustments are framed as progress because they maintain surface stability. Observers focused on events miss this entirely. Nothing appears wrong. Markets function, institutions operate, the narrative remains intact. But sequence matters more than appearance. What matters is not that stability exists, but how it is maintained, whether it is supported by flexibility or by postponement, whether resilience is structural or reputational. This distinction is rarely discussed at the peak of confidence. It only becomes obvious afterward. History does not move loudly at these moments. It moves quietly beneath consensus. Capital reallocates. Incentives shift. Systems adapt internally without altering their external story. By the time disagreement returns, positioning has already changed. When confidence becomes consensus, history starts moving quietly. History shows that systems do not wait for public understanding before they adapt. They move ahead of awareness. Long before panic, long before headlines change tone, adjustments begin at levels that rarely attract attention. This is the phase where history stops speaking loudly and starts whispering. Capital is usually the first to move, not because it predicts the future, but because it responds to constraints earlier than narratives do. It reacts to imbalance, friction, and diminishing optionality. These signals rarely appear dramatic. They emerge as small reallocations, procedural changes, or technical refinements. At this stage, nothing looks wrong. Markets remain liquid. Growth appears intact. Indicators suggest health. This is precisely why the shift is overlooked. People associate warning with volatility. When volatility is absent, concern feels misplaced. History shows that repositioning begins not when collapse is imminent, but when continuity becomes uncertain. Institutions play a central role here. Unlike individuals, institutions are designed to survive regimes, not predict them. Their mandate is not conviction, but endurance. As a result, they adjust quietly, incrementally, and defensively. Reserves are diversified. Settlement mechanisms are reconsidered. Exposure is reduced without being eliminated. Language remains neutral. The rationale is always technical. Efficiency, risk management, prudence. No announcement is necessary. This pattern has appeared repeatedly. In multiple historical cases, markets reached apparent peaks of confidence while structural repositioning was already underway. Trade volumes remained high. Asset prices stayed elevated. Credit expanded. From the outside, the system looked robust. But beneath the surface, capital was changing posture. History shows that this phase is invisible to most economists at the time. Not because economists lack intelligence, but because their tools focus on equilibrium, not transition. Models are built to explain stability, not to detect erosion of assumptions. Historians, by contrast, recognize the pattern immediately, but only in retrospect. They are not better forecasters. They simply see sequences rather than snapshots. What economists often interpret as noise, historians later identify as signal. This is why so many collapses appear sudden. The public experiences the final adjustment, not the preparatory phase. When panic arrives, it feels like an external shock. In reality, it is the moment when preparation becomes visible. History shows that by the time fear becomes widespread, the system has already passed the point of structural choice. Options have narrowed, paths have been selected, outcomes become constrained. The illusion of suddenness is powerful. People ask, how did this happen so quickly? The answer is that it did not. It happened quietly, slowly, and rationally, just not publicly. The whisper phase is where most meaning resides. It is where intent becomes structure, where belief gives way to positioning, where trust is replaced by optionality. This is not conspiracy, it is adaptation. Systems do not collapse suddenly, they exhaust alternatives. By the time panic arrives, the outcome is already locked in. The final phase of a long structural cycle is not marked by surprise. It is marked by realization. The system has already moved, capital has already adjusted, incentives have already shifted. What changes is not reality, but awareness. History shows that this is when transitions feel sudden. Participants encounter consequences without having experienced the preparation. Prices adjust, liquidity tightens. Relationships that once felt permanent reveal limits. The speed of change appears shocking only because the earlier phases were ignored or misunderstood. This is why collapses feel accidental, but never are. Every major systemic breakdown follows a period of apparent normalcy. The system continues to function right up until it cannot. Not because warning signs were absent, but because they were interpreted as confirmation of strength rather than signals of fragility. The realization phase is psychologically destabilizing. People search for causes, villains, and moments of failure. But history suggests that the cause is rarely an event. It is a sequence. What matters is not the trigger, but the exhaustion of options. By the time realization arrives, preparation is no longer possible. Adaptation replaces choice. Actors respond to constraints rather than shaping them. Policy becomes reactive. Markets become defensive. This is where the difference between surviving a collapse and understanding it becomes clear. Survival is about response. Understanding is about recognition. Those who recognize cycles early are not immune to disruption. They still experience loss, friction, and uncertainty. But they are not disoriented. They do not mistake consequence for cause. They do not expect a return to a structure that has already ended. History shows that ignorance is rarely punished directly. There is no moment of reckoning tied to a single mistake. Instead, systems repeat patterns until they are understood. Each generation inherits the assumption that its structures are permanent. Each generation is proven wrong in different ways. The lesson is not that collapse is inevitable, but that transformation is continuous. What changes is who adapts first. This pattern has appeared before, and it will appear again, not because people fail to learn, but because stability always feels convincing in the moment. The ending is always the same because the sequence is always the same. History doesn't punish ignorance. It simply repeats until patterns are recognized.